Welcome to Legendary Exits, conversations with purpose-driven entrepreneurs. In this series, we sit down with the leaders and legends who turned their exits into opportunities for impact. We explore living lives of significance, leveraging exits to fund personal and financial goals, and building a best-in-class business along the way. You ready? Let's dive in.
Hey, welcome to the Legendary Exits podcast, where we interview exited legends, leaders who are building, and those that guide them. I'm Micah Brandenburg, your host, and I'm so delighted to have Casey Brown with us today, who is a pricing expert. Casey, thanks so much for carving out some time to be with us.
I'm super delighted to be here, Micah. Thanks.
Yes, looking forward to this conversation. Hey, when we were introduced by a mutual acquaintance, Carrie Hanasek, probably 2 months ago, I did not know some things that I've since learned about you. 3 that might be of interest to our audience. 1, you have a TED Talk that has been viewed over 4 million times online.
Yeah.
2, I know you've keynoted at the EOS conference. And for a lot of folks who are listening to this podcast, they're familiar with Gino Wickman's book, Traction. And so I know you've keynoted at the conference 4 that is based off that book.
Mm-hmm.
And third thing I learned about you is that you have your own book that you just published about 3 months ago called Fearless Pricing. And Gino actually wrote that forward for you. So with all that in mind, I am just super excited to learn from you. I'm super excited about what we're going to call out of this conversation for the audience today.
Same. I'm ready to get into it.
Let's do it. So before we dive into some of the business side of it and empowering folks to understand how they can increase their own pricing execution, not strategy, as we've talked about, which we're going to get into in a minute, just help us understand who you are. Tell us where you're at. Tell us a little bit about yourself, whatever you might want to share with the audience.
Sure. So when I talk about myself professionally, I describe myself as a pricing geek. I just love the topic. I think it's so fascinating. I'd taken an econ class in college and thought that pricing was essentially like the idea of a demand curve where you sell more if you price lower, you sell less if you price higher, like this super simple mathematical relationship between price and demand. And once I got into pricing, saw how it worked in the real world, I got kind of hooked on the mystery and the chaos that is real pricing in the real world, and a lot of psychology, a lot of fear, a lot of bluffing. I often compare pricing to poker. Like everybody's bluffing, everybody's trying to hide how much they're willing to pay or how little they're willing to accept, and all of the gray area in pricing is what kind of hooked me, and I've been after it for 25 years and just love it.
I love it. And I want to dig into that conversation around fear around pricing in just a moment. But answer me this question first.
Mm-hmm.
I saw you did your undergrad in chemical engineering. How did you
Yes.
go from that to pricing geek? That's fascinating. Walk us through that real quick.
Well, it's an interesting arc. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be an actor because I love to entertain and describe and explain and communicate and keep people fascinated and entertained and interested. But I grew up on the wrong side of the poverty line, and a career in theater didn't look like a straight line to being able to keep a roof over my head forever. So I was also good at math and science. And so I thought, well, engineers, they make a decent buck, I think. So let me go ahead and become an engineer. I actually also double majored in Spanish in chemical engineering because I speak fluent Spanish, studied and lived in Spain. And then I ended up going back and getting an MBA. So
Wonderful.
if it is not clear through that little early trajectory that I didn't know what I really wanted to do when I grew up, I did not know, right? And I started my career as an engineer at General Electric in the Jack Welch heyday when it was one of the biggest companies in the world, and was an early Six Sigma black belt at GE, which is a rotational program.
Yes.
Ended up doing did rotations in a bunch of different areas of the business, but did a rotation on the pricing team. And that sort of thing I described why I love pricing. I got to see that front row, the intersection of art and science, people and process, data and psychology. And that was it. The die was cast. And then I pursued pricing roles in corporate America of increasing authority, and eventually decided, hey, I could bring what I've learned in these, big, well-resourced companies to the middle market and help small and medium-sized privately held companies do pricing better.
Want to go all the way back to your comment about theater, regular theater, musical theater?
I can't sing. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. Regular theater. All right.
I don't know if we've talked about this, but you're speaking to a classically trained cellist since the age of 5. And I was on the path to go to the big name schools, and life took me in a different direction, but I still can play it a lot. And I do think there is a correlation oftentimes between those arts and sort of these soft skills that we talk a lot
For
about that I
sure.
think is going to tie into our conversation around fear. So,
100%. And furthermore, it's funny because a big part of my professional life now is keynote speaking, right? You mentioned I did the
mm,
keynote at EOS conference. By the way, Gino was one of the other keynoters, and Patrick Lencioni was, I was
mm,
like fangirling. I was just so
I,
excited and
I
delighted to be
love
sharing a
Patrick.
stage with those
Yes, I love
titans
Patrick's
of
work. I love the five dysfunctions of a team. I'm a huge
same.
advocate. And
Same.
yeah,
So, but my point is like now it's funny because although I'm not performing plays and acting in movies, I am
yeah.
standing in front of hundreds of people at a time and trying to shift how they see the world, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think there's a correlation between self-regulation, managing our emotions, the fear that comes. I can think back to being a high schooler and playing solos with a symphony, right? And you're regulating your heartbeat, your breathing to calm and steady yourself.
Sure.
I think for so many salespeople, in the conversation we're going to get into in a moment, that fear, it also has a physical and an emotional element, right?
100%.
So really looking forward to that. Tell us just super quickly what you're doing today. I know you're a speaker. I know you're an author. I know you lead a pricing strategies company. Just before we dive into the rest of our conversation, what are you doing today?
So I would say that just a little bit differently. I don't lead a pricing strategy company. I lead a pricing training firm, and
Yes, thank you.
we
Thank
will,
you.
I think, chat a little bit about some of these distinctions and why I
Yeah.
think they're important. But yeah, that's professionally largely the focus is really kind of leading with content from the stage
Mm,
and from the book, and with blogs and videos and other kind of content that I put out. And then we have this pricing training firm that helps
yes.
kind of expose customer tactics and then arm sellers with the methods and tools and
Mm,
messaging. And frankly, the most importantly, the confidence to negotiate more deals
yeah.
at higher prices. Um,
That's really cool. I want to go from there, from the theater to the stage to what I felt was the summary statement from your TED Talk that's had 4 million views, where you said, no one will ever pay you what you're worth. They only pay you what they think you're worth, and you control their thinking. And so to me, it sounds like at the heart of your work, we're really dealing with perceptions. Tell us more about that. Tell us more about that statement.
100%. I mean, you can have the best product or service in the world, but if customers don't understand that or connect with that, you will never be paid what you're worth.
Yeah.
This is so important because very many organizations and individual sellers inside organizations, you know, uh, really want to just point to the fact that the product or service is valuable and that is
Mm,
going to somehow speak for itself. And it doesn't. It can't. It's not that it's completely false. It's just that customers are notoriously self-interested. They got a million things they're doing. They're running a million directions. For them to stop and fully understand your value without you telling them and pointing it out to them and connecting it more importantly to their problems and needs, it
mm,
doesn't happen. And
yes.
most of our clients are in the B2B space. So you've got, a business buying from another business, the degree to which buyers are out seeking out the full view of your value. Like it's just not how it works. I think though, relative to perception. When we sell something, we have the ability to influence the perception of value. Obviously, this is all underpinned by actually being valuable, right? Having a
Yeah.
product or service that people value, but then helping the customer understand it is a huge part of what we teach. But the thing that I want to back up and kind of point to that I think is um, in your question, but not said out loud, is the
Go for it.
part of the perception problem isn't what the customer thinks. It's what I think. It's my
Mhm.
own fear. It's my own doubts. It's my own concerns. It's my own self-limiting beliefs. The reality is that the most price sensitive person in most every negotiation is not the buyer, it's the seller.
Mm.
And our own fears and self-limiting beliefs stop us from asking for enough and cause us to cave too quickly in the face of price objections.
I love it. So how do we, if that's the critical issue in pricing execution, as you have trained me to understand, not pricing strategy, but pricing execution, if that's the critical issue, then how do you encourage teams and how do you train teams to deal with it?
Well, it's very important not just to focus on skills.
Yeah.
That's such a common, I guess, shortfall, I would say, in a lot of training programs, and particularly training programs focused on salespeople. Sort
Yeah.
of teach them what to do, what to say, what process to follow. Here's a script.
Mm.
Here's how to ask better questions. Here's how to handle objections better. Here's how to
Yeah.
communicate value. All
Yes.
those are super important skills and necessary, but very often if somebody knows what to do, what to say, what process to follow, but in the moment, in the heat of battle, when the customer's breathing down their neck or threatening to take the business somewhere else or comparing you to an inferior quote, salespeople who have been trained to do that stuff won't do it, or they can't do it. They feel
Yeah.
pushy, they feel salesy, they feel weird, they get in their head, they get in their gut. So it's incredibly, incredibly important that we don't just train skill, we train mindset. Go ahead. Looks like you're going to ask
That's
a
what I was
question.
going to ask you, because clearly process can be helpful. Scripts
Of
can be helpful,
course.
right?
You're
In the
talking to an engineer. I love process. Love
yes,
it. It's
yeah,
just
and I
an incomplete solution.
yeah, and so you were beating me to the punch. I was going to ask you, well, if it's not that,
It's not
what
that.
is it
What
that
it
is needed? And it sounds like mindset is where you want to go with that.
That's right. And how to train people to different mindset is, I'm a pedagogy geek as much as I am a pricing geek. And so I'm always looking at and learning and trying to understand how to teach people how to do something better
Okay.
in a better way. Train them. How do I want to say this? Let me take another run at this. Try to figure out better ways to teach people how to do things or how to think about things differently. And so, especially when you talk about something as thorny and amorphous as mindset, that's a little
Yeah.
bit difficult to describe the best ways to do that in a 30-second answer on a podcast. But
Oh, yeah.
one of the things that is really important when it comes to shifting mindset is really shining a light on those beliefs. It's all the time that we uncover that people have self-limiting beliefs that they aren't even aware are self-limiting. So sort of like half the battle is shining a light on the dark corners of our belief system such that we understand that, oh, I hold this belief. And I'll give you an example to make this real for you,
Please do.
for your listeners. So one of the mindset topics we dive into in our training is our relationship with money. Right. And
Okay.
everybody has a money story, right? You grew up with a lot of it, you think one thing. You grew up with none of it, you think one thing. You heard your parents say money doesn't grow on trees, or rich people are evil, or poor people are evil, or it's rude to talk about it. Like, who knows? We've heard a million things from literally birth all the way through our lives. And we've had our own experiences as adults with money. And that all is dragged in with us to every sales conversation. And so, but if we're unaware of it, it can exert pressure on our selling skills that we aren't even aware of. So, for example, if you were raised in a home where you heard it's rude to discuss money, we don't talk about money at the dinner table, it's rude, then if you're a salesperson, you have to talk about money, you're fighting your own training, lifelong training, not
Yeah.
sales training, life training, right? And so
Yes.
that can make folks really have a difficult time having frank and unemotional or less emotional conversations with customers about budgets, about prices. And so they avoid it. And if you avoid price talk, the easiest way to do that is to hurry up and discount so I can get done talking about money and get back to the other parts of selling that I love and I'm good at.
Yes, I love that. And you're speaking and you're leaning into something that I deeply believe in, that is human beings were complex, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, perhaps, right?
100%.
And so I guess a question I've got is, you think about mindset, because you're in the mindset change business, really. It's pricing execution, but it's really mindset change business.
100%.
So two follow-up questions. One is, what is at the heart of changing our mindset, whether it be about money and pricing or any issue? And then the second that I want to go to after that is, if I'm a leader in my organization, this is going to mean that my salespeople need to have this capability to change their mindset if I'm going to change their pricing strategy. But I'm going to guess that you've come across salespeople who are not able to make that leap. And so I'm unfairly serving you up two questions. Question one, what is at the heart of changing our mindset around this topic or any other?
Well, one is like what I already kind of said, which is the sort of exposure of the belief.
Okay.
It's understanding how that belief or mindset is actually limiting us today. And then it's engaging in some practice where we kind of work against our training. And by training, again, I'm talking about life training, where we're working against our experiences a little bit. It's like, I was taught, I'm just going to say it really simply. If I was taught that it's rude to talk about money, that means that when I show up in sales conversations, I'm not good at really frank, honest discussions about money. And I rush in and discount to stop talking about it. That's costing me maybe about $10,000 a year in sales commissions. Okay. Is working through my mindset issue around my unhelpful beliefs about discussing money worth overcoming? Yeah, because that's $10,000 of commission. And okay, now how do I do it? And then each sort of family of beliefs, there's some different coaching we have. There may be different strategies we ask people to practice. But whether it's, about difficulty discussing money or need for approval, which is another common one,
Yes.
or being too trusting about what our prospects tell us, or all kinds of other mindset things, we
Yeah.
have some kind of tactics we ask people to practice. The tactics themselves are a little less important than the piece I said, which is practice. We
Yeah.
have to be willing to lean into some discomfort, try it out, feel the
Mm,
fear, and do it anyway, right? And
yes.
we do, we're big fans of role play, and everybody hates it. Nobody likes it. I don't like it. You don't like it. Nobody listening to this podcast likes it, but it's incredibly effective. It's starting to build some comfort and
Mm.
fluency in something that you've always struggled with.
What I'm hearing you say is we act out of our beliefs, which I concur with you on. And so what you're seeking to do with clients you work with and their sales teams is ID the belief and then quantify the cost and then seek to go in a pedagogy, practice what it looks like to actually take the right actions, which may be against that belief. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
100% with you. Even in our business, the number one thing I say to a business owner or CEO, where we're trying to grow enterprise value from, let's say, 10 to 30 million over 5 years, I say, Casey, the easiest part is the corporate strategy. The hardest part, it's you. It's the fact that you're going to have to change your beliefs and the way you show up in the business to
that's
actually
right.
achieve that growth of life cycle. So I love the way that you're thinking. Um, in that process that you've laid out, and you're clear that you have different reps that you put people through.
Sure.
What percentage of the time do you see salespeople who are really unable to come along and sort of make that transition? And how do you encourage your clients to handle that?
I don't see a lot of really binary. I don't see it quite as binary side. It's generally
Okay.
not like they get it or they don't get it, or they make the shift or they don't make the shift.
Mhm.
I think of it more like progress, right? Like
I see.
I use a sports analogy when I describe this. Like, okay, let's
Yeah,
imagine we're playing football, and for any international listeners, I'm talking about American football. You've
exactly.
got some sales reps that are already in the red zone, right? They're inside the 20, they're close to the goal line, and we can,
Mm.
shift them. Then great, they're in the end zone. There are other folks starting deep in enemy territory, right? Like their
Mm.
mindset and starting point for their self limiting beliefs is so deep and so unhelpful to profitable selling that we may not get them to the end zone. We may not, certainly not in the course of a 10-week program or some other kind of program we're doing to kind of quickly shift price execution. It's okay with me, and frankly, most business owners and leaders and sales VPs that we're talking to. Not everybody necessarily has to get to the end zone. I mean, we'd love it, right? But
Yeah.
if we can get that person to midfield, we've made an enormous difference. So
Yes.
ideally, we would be able to quote unquote reprogram everybody's beliefs so that they're armed and dangerous for super profitable selling tomorrow.
Yes.
Everybody's ceiling is maybe in a different place, and the starting point is in a different place. So I can't say that I've ever seen a salesperson that can't get better at this or doesn't get better at it.
Yeah.
Their best may be in a different place than somebody else's best.
You're encouraging us not to think of it as black, white, yes, no, binary, but a spectrum and a continuum of moving
Right.
down the yardage of the field. I want to come back to your comment, or I want to come back to an idea and just ask you a quick question. What I have found in the world of change, because I'm in the change business too, right? We're all in the change business
Yep.
if you're consulting, is that I have to find a reason, a really compelling and personal reason for my CEOs and business owners I work with that they really, really want. They're visualizing what that goalpost looks like of getting to that increased valuation,
Hmm.
because it's always somewhere around the 4 to 6 month mark that they want to turn back. They want to go
Yeah.
back to their old ways. Is that something that you find in the transformation? What do you think is key? Because everybody's going to have that day where they show up, to a meeting and they don't want to do it that way. What have
Sure.
you guys found key to come back to get that person continuing on the journey and not just turn back to the old ways?
So that's an excellent question, and it actually is reflected in the changing of what we offer as a business to help people do
Okay.
this. So in the old days, for a long time, we did half day and full day workshops. We'd
Yes.
show up, you'd bring your whole team together, we'd share our content and do some breakout sessions and get people really excited about this stuff, and then we would get on a plane and we would leave. And we have clients from that time, 10 plus years ago, that hired us for a workshop that still
Okay.
talk about some of those concepts. So I think that can work, and it is sticky material that makes a big difference. Uh,
Mm,
but the reality is that, there's this, we call it workshop euphoria, or, the
mm,
forgetting curve, right? It's like I took a ton of notes. That presenter was great. It was super informative and very interesting. But then you go back to the desk and there's 20 voicemails and 200 emails, and you don't crack the notebook for a week, and then you don't crack it for a month. And now I believe there's a handful of concepts of our many concepts that are so sticky that even if you remember just one or two or three, that's why those businesses 10 years later are still citing millions of dollars improvement from a half-day workshop. That said, they are tapping into 10% of what's possible, right? So
Yes.
we changed our offering to really respect and reflect what you just described. And so now our flagship offering is a 10-week program, which is still fast. It's still a very discrete amount of time and money that are tied up in doing it. But what's really important in there is there's 5 like cycles of content and practice that are built into that. And the idea then is there's a chance for the cement to start to dry on new skills. So you said before, belief precedes action. 100% agree. What I'm describing is sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. You have to act before you believe. And when you
100%.
And when you do and it works, oh my gosh, I could never get a client to pay me $25,000 for this kind of engagement. And then you muster up the courage to say the words out loud, and the client says yes. Oh my gosh, now data from the real world is it proof that my self-limiting belief wasn't true.
Yes.
And so then you start to have wins. It's like a virtuous cycle. There's like a little bit of a flywheel. You see the self-limiting belief. You understand the impact of it. You buy, at least on paper, that maybe there's a different way to do it, and I'm going to try it out. And then I try it and it works. And then I try it again and then it works. And I try it again and then it works. And you've got cycles where that gets repeated. It starts to believe, it changes the belief. Now the belief is different.
Two things that I love about what you've talked about, and that is that acting changes beliefs. If we all did whatever we felt like doing, we wouldn't get up in the morning and we'd eat chocolate ice cream all day long, right? But what my experience has been as a human being is that when I do get out of bed, when I do get out in the sunshine, when I do take a walk, my feelings are changing. So it is action that changes belief oftentimes.
Right.
The other thing I love about what you're calling out is integration. And that is the concept that everybody's doing stuff. We all have a way of doing things, whether we know it or not. And when you hear this content, you've got to integrate it into the way, deliberately the way of doing things. And I love that.
That's right.
Hey, I want to go to a question, and that is in pricing execution, which is your domain expertise, and clearly you are at the top of that field. What does a best-in-class company look like? One of the things we're bent on with our clients is getting them to the 75th percentile, where they are truly better than 75% of other companies in their industry. So if you walked into one of my clients today or any business, how would you know in pricing execution that they were best in class?
Sure.
What would you look at?
It's a great question. And I would say very, very often when I'm talking to a CEO or a sales leader who's frustrated about feeling, suspecting or knowing that their team is leaving some money on the table with pricing, I'll ask a list of questions like, is this happening in your business? Is this happening in your business? And the answers for the not best in class companies regarding pricing execution is, all that stuff's happening. And so I'll just list out a couple of those things. It's most pricing decisions are made from fear, not from confidence, which means we're doing what I call defensive pricing. And that's sort of what's it take not to lose the deal versus pricing to win based confidently in our value. Price increases send everyone into a panic. Sellers negotiate harder with the boss than they do the customers. We cave too quickly to objections on price, especially when compared against inferior competition. So behaviorally, those are the kinds of things that are showing up in companies that are not best in class at price execution.
Got it.
That,
and these are very qualitative. Everything you've told me is very qualitative.
Absolutely. And there's a quantitative implication of it, of course, because they're making less money. Now, whether they're leaving 5% on the table or 50% on the table depends on how bad they are at that, but also to a degree what industry they're in. Because best in class and worst in class companies in distribution, their gap in margin is not nearly as big as it is in professional services firms, right? So there's a little bit of an industry lens in terms of trying to turn the behavioral qualitative stuff into, okay, what's that costing me? What are the dollars associated with that?
Lean into that comment for a moment. You talked that professional services firms, it seems like your experience is that they have a bigger gap between the best in class and the not. Why do you believe that, or what have you seen?
What I would say is if you, less than the best in class and not, and more in terms of what that means in dollars, the implication of that for dollars. So for example, if you said, hey, I want to get a website, you can have a website for sub $5,000. and you
Okay.
can have a website for north of 500,000, right? Whereas in the distribution market, if you're like, I need a pen, the best in
Yeah.
class and the worst in class, like the price tag is not 5,000. It's,
I
one
see.
might be 10 or 20% more than the other. In other industries like the website, the ad agencies and marketing services
Yes.
firms, that the price differential between the best and the worst is 100x, right? So
Yeah.
the differences in behaviors of my sales team are the same for both, but
Yeah.
the financial magnitude of
Mm.
that, and that's why, like, you're right to. And look, I'm an engineer. I love quantification. To say
Yeah.
those are qualitative behavior, measures. What about the quantitative? There is a quantitative implication, but how to quantify that depends on that industry a little bit.
100%. Two follow-ups. The first one is I always say to people, even as a former CFO, I can look at your financial statements and I can tell you what the problem is, but you're never going to transform your company just by focusing on accounting and finance,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It is all this qualitative work that you're speaking about doing in pricing execution. That could be the number one place that I always look to with a client is pricing, right?
Well, and we say this all the time, and we've already talked about this a little bit, but the way we say this is belief precedes behaviors, and behaviors precede results. And so
Mm,
where we focus is the leading, I think we could talk about metrics, but those are lagging indicators. The
agreed.
behaviors and the beliefs are the leading indicators. And that's
Fully
why
agree.
when I say, when you kind of ask this question, like, what are best in class companies? What I can observe is these behaviors. People are
Yeah.
making decisions from confidence, not from fear. They're not, they will negotiate harder with customers than they will their boss. They are confident and masterful and courageous in executing price increases. They don't routinely discount when faced with inferior competition. Those things then translate to hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars for their firm,
Yeah.
depending on their size and their industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to piece this together, I don't think we're saying anything in conflict. Just
Yeah,
our process when we start with a client is we're starting with the financials. It's quantitative,
right.
right?
There's two different,
And
it's sort of outside in or inside out, right? Yeah.
exactly. And oftentimes what we're doing, and we do this in the first 6 weeks of working with a client, we're recasting their net profitability. And then we're looking out and we're saying, what does best in class look like? And
Yeah.
75% of the time, this is statistics, they're not best in class. And so then we're on a detective journey to say, well, why is gross margin not as high as it should be, or EBITDA percentage?
Yeah.
But again, you're not going to find the answer in accounting. You're going to find the answer by digging into the topics and the things that you are speaking about as one area. Fully
Well, and
agree.
even once you know what the problem is, the solution is not necessarily a quantitative solution, right? So,
Agreed.
yeah, for sure. We
Agreed.
are 100% aligned on this,
Yes. I
Micah.
love it. I love it. Hey, do you have frameworks? Obviously, we've been talking a lot about beliefs that work their way out into action as being a core piece of pricing
Mhm.
execution. So for a CEO, for an owner who's listening to this conversation that we're having, do you have a framework or a way of thinking about this idea of pricing execution that you can share with the audience? Something that's simple, something that folks can sort of hang their hat on, or is it a little bit more complex than that?
I mean, so both. So yes, it's a little more complex than that because the biggest obstacle is not lack of a framework or process. The biggest obstacle is mindset and the self-limiting
Mm,
beliefs of your sales team. Or if you are the solo seller, it's probably your self-limiting beliefs, right?
yes.
So it's the fix, so to speak, and this is what I've spent a couple hundred pages of my book talking about, is
Mm,
not like it. Look, it is seductive to think, oh, if I just, spent more time in this spreadsheet, I would
mm,
suddenly have the answer to pricing. The fact is, and this kind
yes.
of gets at the root of my why we are a pricing execution firm, not a pricing strategy firm, is that it is very tempting to focus time and effort building a better spreadsheet, better a
Yeah.
strategy, right? Like, oh, if only we could do X or Y or Z, then we'd be significantly more profitable. Well, the thing is, companies spend a lot of time and money putting together great strategies, and then they put it
Mhm.
in the hands of their sales team. And if we do not have the hearts and minds of the sales team, they will march right around that perfect strategy and discount anyway. My
Mm,
belief, and I've seen lots of companies, the way this plays out, is their strategy's already, and when I say good enough, let's say it's a B strategy. Is
yeah.
there benefit in turning it into an A strategy? Sure. But your team is executing at an F. And when
Yeah.
you get the team executing at a B, now there
Mm,
are millions of dollars at play. Now you can invest in strategy if you want, or you can buy yourself a
agreed.
boat, or I don't care what you do with it. But the biggest leap is not our strategy, it's our execution. Now,
Fully
as it
agree.
pertains to that question you asked, like, okay, then are there frameworks? Well, not for the whole picture, because the whole picture is very psychological and fear driven and belief driven. That said, there are absolutely, I would say, tools or helpful frameworks to contain those
Mm.
self-limiting beliefs and fears and stop them from causing us to operate exclusively from fear.
Love
And
it.
one, and I can share the link to this in the show notes, or for you to put in your show notes, and
Wonderful. That'd be great.
that is a downloadable tool that we make available for free. It's it's essentially a simple kind of a what if calculator. So you say,
Okay.
okay, if I plug in my revenue and my gross margin and my net margin, if I change price by 5%, what happens? If I change my price by 5%, but I lose 6% sales volume, what happens? If I increase my price by
Mm.
5%, but I lose 5% sales volume and my cost of goods goes up by 4%, what happens? So it allows you to play with cost, volume, price, levers, both overhead
Yeah.
and COGS, to like sort of game out what will happen. The reason this is important, because I said most pricing decisions are made from fear. People don't take price increases often enough or big enough because they're afraid of volume loss. But they often don't actually do the math that says, okay, if I do this and this happens, what's my profit picture look like?
Yeah.
So that kind of analysis can bound the risk, can bound the fear. Say, okay, if I raise
Yeah.
prices by 8% and I lose 7% of my customers, oh, I'm making an extra $1.2 million. Oh, okay.
Yes.
So that kind of thing can just put starch in the back for decision making.
I love it. I haven't heard that starts in the back for decision making. I'm gonna have to use that. But what you're saying resonates with me deeply because one of my principles for life is clarity plus action equals purposeful movement. I think the number one reason we don't have clarity is because we have too many options and we don't know. And what I love about this tool that you have built, and we will list that in the show notes, is it does give some level of clarity about where these decisions are going to lead to. Again, it's really about the execution, as you've told us about.
For
It's
sure.
not about the spreadsheet, but we can have a little bit of confidence to get there. Hey, you talked about your book that just came out 3 months ago. Tell us a little bit about fearless pricing and what you're addressing in the book and what we're going to learn as we buy a copy of that and read along with what you've written.
Sure. So if it were as simple as a framework, it wouldn't have required a book, right? It would just be, here's this downloadable tool, go do that.
Yes.
And so that's a chance for me to kind of convince folks over the course of reading the book, not only that my empirical experience in pricing is true, that it is mostly a fear and an emotional and psychological problem more than it is a calculation or a strategy problem,
Mm.
but it's actually walking them through some of the kinds of things that I mentioned around mindset and some of the different ways to practice and view that. So
Mm.
it's essentially the same stuff we teach in our training programs. It's the same stuff I speak about on the stage. Why the
Love
book
it.
though, versus just keeping speaking on the stage and keeping working with our clients is a function of scale.
Yes.
For me, pricing is mission driven work. And
Mm.
what I mean by that is I have a deeply held belief that if you deliver excellence to your customers, then you ought to be paid like you're excellent. And
I love it.
anything less than that is an injustice because it's
Mm.
robbing you of resources that are rightfully yours. And those resources you can pour into your family and community, you can pour into your employees, you can pour into hiring and paying people better. You could do like all
Yes.
kinds of things are possible if we're actually demanding the justice of fair pay for the excellence we provide. This is what fuels me to get on plane after plane and go miss my kids and be on the road because too many companies and individuals are accepting mediocre pay for excellent work. However many stages they put me on and however many clients hire us, there are literally millions of businesses in this country and around the world that need this content that are never going to
Yeah.
be sitting in one of my keynotes. And so
I
for me, it's
love
about reaching and expanding the impact.
I love that you are so keyed in on this, that you've used a strong word like it is an injustice. And I'm with you because one of the reasons that we're in our business at Legendary Exits is we think and we believe that entrepreneurs have a unique ability to make an impact on the world through their employees first, through their customers second, and then obviously for their own families. And we don't have to wait
100%.
on politicians and changing legislation. We get to do it. We get to change the world through our businesses. And I think
100%.
your piece around pricing is a huge part of that because as we have more margin, now we get to decide how we want to deploy it for all those different audiences and stakeholders. I love it. Hey, Casey, I'm curious in your practice and your career, have you had clients who've gone through acquisitions? Our clients here at Legendary Exits they're building intentionally towards some sort of future transition. It might be an internal, might be an external. My question, if you have had clients who've gone through that, is any insights to share with us around what prospective buyers may have looked for around the sales team or the pricing strategies in particular? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's interesting. Very often. So like we do a fair bit of work with private equity companies and their portfolio companies. And one of the first moves that a lot of private equity firms do is let's figure out if we've got some unexercised pricing power. Let's go goose the EBITDA by
Yeah.
leveraging this thing that's been under leveraged called all the value we provide that we aren't charging for. And it
Yes.
is like money rains from the sky
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
much overnight, not because we incurred a whole bunch of extra cost, fixed cost, or we didn't, go grow revenue 2x overnight. We just did something that the former owner hadn't done, which is recognize the unexercised pricing power, and we're going to go ask for it. And then all of a sudden our EBITDA goes from 6% to 14, right? Why that is part of the answer to your question is the owner, which is maybe the founder or the family member that's, they did all the hard work of building the value. It's just that the PE firm gets to cash in on it. And that
Yes.
doesn't sit great with me. I would
Mm-mm.
love to see if there's people listening to this that are working towards an exit. Let that benefit accrue to you. And if you are not raising prices or raising them enough because you're afraid you're going to lose a bunch of sales volume, or you're too busy focused on selling and serving your customers to slow down and pay attention to this pricing piece. We do a price increase every January, whatever. You are letting somebody else cash a check tomorrow for the hard work you're putting in today. And if
Wow.
you have the, if sort of like, okay, if you buy what I'm saying, but you're afraid to do it, action might need to precede belief. But
Yes.
then now you've propped your EBITDA up to 14%. And
Yeah.
now on a multiple that your firm is worth, now there's a giant
Yeah.
exit on the other side of that.
Yeah. I want to tease it out just for a quick minute. You've delivered some gold to us right here. And that is, most companies, unless you're high growth, outside funded technology SaaS company, most companies are going to be valued at a multiple of their bottom line, their EBITDA or their recasting. And so there are all these opportunities, and we see them. Probably top 4 plays: pricing, which is why I was so excited to have this conversation with you. Second play, renegotiating raw material inputs if we're
Vendor
making a widget.
contracts and
Big third play, utilization rates, particularly for services company. We all have a system of production, whether it's dependent upon a truck that goes out to spray lawns or whether it's some other, system of constraints. Most of the time we enter into companies and they're not doing as much. They could be doing more revenue through that same set of costs, and that's pushing more money to the bottom line. And then certainly some of it is just too much overhead relative to the revenue.
Sure.
So all these different plays that are available, and you're talking about the number one play that we leverage in our playbook, which is pricing. And I love that focus of it's there. They've done the hard work, and that owner just needs to find those opportunities and begin to capture it because it's going to drive up valuation.
That's to me, like one of the things that I find still so fascinating about pricing is the root of pricing power is value. It's not cost, it's not effort, it's not brand, it's value. And if you have done the hard work of building a product or service that is best in class, that precipitates pricing power that you are choosing to exercise or not. And too many companies are not, or not to the degree that's possible, and almost always because of fear. And it is entirely your choice as a business owner to give up millions of dollars because of your fear. I just don't love to see it because it's not necessary. Especially then you're letting somebody else cash that check tomorrow.
Before we move to the close with a couple of questions, I do want to hit on something you just said, and that is you actually contrasted value and brand, right? Just a moment ago. What are your thoughts around that? Because brand perception in particular is how people perceive us. Is there not a correlation to value? How would you
it's
play
funny.
that
As
out?
soon as it popped out of my mouth, I was like, I shouldn't have said that way because it's actually part of value. So typically, like when people talk about like prices relate, like there is a especially cost and time. And you mentioned professional services firms. It's like it's hours or it's raw material costs, or cost does not drive price, only value does. And I'll say it again because this is a thing that people think they know, but they make decisions all the time if this isn't
Mm.
true. Cost does not drive price, only value does. Brand is intimately tied with value. So
Yeah.
I'll walk back that one. There's the reason I think it sort of belongs on that list is that we often point to things that we believe are valuable that the customer doesn't actually value. And an example is in a professional services firm, let's say an engineering firm, our team of engineers that we have 16 PhD engineers on staff with a combined 427 years of experience. Like, I would say kind of so what? And it's not that so what, because there is an immense amount of value there. The problem
Mm.
is you're looking at that value through the lens of internal value.
Yes.
What does those 420 years of combined experience do for the customer? Right. And
Mm.
so brand has a little bit that's where like there's these things that are valuable, but we point to them as if that's why people should pay us more. But why they should pay us more is
Yes.
what that does for them.
You're hitting on something that I'm passionate about, and I'm going to connect the dots and see if you agree. And that is, we talk a lot about buyer personas in B2B and firmographics. What are the companies we work for? Demographics, on the individual. But really what I believe is that the psychographics, what that buyer feels and thinks and believes and values is really where these come alive. And again, coming back to this conversation, it sounds like you're saying, focus in on what buyers value. That's really psychographics. That's
100%.
really where value is created. Anything to add or correct on that?
I'm so happy you said that. And
Wow.
there's a Michael Gerber quote from the E-Myth Revisited. He
Mm.
says, demographics is the science of marketplace reality. Psychographics is the science of perceived marketplace reality. And well,
Mm.
that kind of takes us back where we started this conversation around perception, right? Like,
Yes.
and customers will never pay you worth. They'll only ever pay you what they think you're worth, and you control their thinking.
Mm.
Psychographics is everything. And this is what another thing I can't ever not think is so cool about pricing is it isn't just a function of tangible, practical, measurable value. It's what the customer believes about
Yes.
that value. You can have the best product or service in the world. You'll never get paid a premium if you can't help them understand and see it. And that's never going to be because you talk about your quality and integrity and years of experience. It's going to be because you can connect the
Yeah.
quality, integrity, and years of experience to the problems that the customer faces.
I love it. Those are also coming back to Patrick Lencioni. He calls those integrities, that's pay to play values. They're
Totally.
actually not
Table
core
stake.
values. So
Table
exactly, they're
stakes.
table stakes.
Irrelevant.
Hey, I want to sort of drive towards the close. I want to serve you up the last question, and then folks have you share how folks can connect with you. And the last question is just one of the things that we're passionate about when we talk about achieving a legendary exit with our clients is living a life of significance now.
Mhm.
And for a lot of us, we're very purpose-driven leaders and intentional people. They
Mhm.
want to live that life of meaning and significance. Now, I'm curious for you. I learned through watching your TED Talk. You're a mom of two girls. But what does living a life of significance mean to you? We've talked about a lot of things around that with mindset, belief, action today.
Yeah.
But I'm just sort of curious, what does that look like for you, and how do you encourage your clients to even do that?
Sure. Well, for me, I am happiest when I'm striving and growing and
Mm.
learning. And so I there's a lot of a life of purpose for me that comes from the work that I do. And I mentioned before, it's not just about, I mean, pricing is dollars and cents for sure, but that's not enough to put me on the road missing my kids, right? It's
Mm.
about connecting to that justice orientation of being paid for value. And I think that gives me a
Mm.
tremendous sense of accomplishment and purpose on the
Love it.
professional side. On the personal side, I have a family. I have two daughters and two stepsons that are my world, and a
Mm.
partner who supports everything I do. He's just a phenomenal. I mean, yeah, I'm super lucky and blessed
Mm.
in my personal life. I also am very involved with some philanthropy work that's really important to me. I mentioned before I
Mm.
speak fluent Spanish, and so
Okay.
for over a decade now, I've been going to Guatemala a couple times a year,
Cool.
involved with cleft palate and cleft lip repair surgery work,
Oh, wow.
and
Wow.
I eventually started a nonprofit to help do fundraising to support more of that kind of work there. So um, for me, and some of this is about keeping my perspective right, uh,
Yeah.
getting very intimately into work with people who are not blessed with a lot of the advantages that I'm sitting on.
Mm.
Remind me to be grateful. It's easy sometimes
Yes.
in the hustle and bustle, and I'm a business owner, I'm a mom, I got a million things going on. look at the inconveniences of my life and say, oh, this problem. But I come back from Guatemala, where food scarcity and poverty is a very real problem for a huge portion of the country. And something as simple
Mm,
as a surgery, which costs, a couple $100s to perform, is out of reach for a lot of folks. I realize I've never had a problem in my entire life. I have
yeah.
inconveniences, I have annoyances, but no real problems. I have healthy kids.
Yes.
I have ability to make my living and put a roof over our head, and I get to do work I love. What a gift my life is.
Amazing. Amazing. I do think, yeah, I think sometimes people can, we can get into the world of pricing and numbers and even and talk about the quantitative. Hey, you're only making 1.5 million and you should be making two and
Yeah,
a half.
right.
And you've got a
Right.
gap in your profitability. But,
Yeah.
I've just become convinced over the course of my life that business is about people. Life is about people. It's about
100%.
impacting the lives of
100%.
folks. And I love the gratitude that you're focused on and the ability to serve those that don't have the same level of advantage. So that's awesome.
The other
Hey,
thing, and I'll just tie
yeah,
back to the thing you said about ripple effect earlier, is that the kinds of businesses that I serve and the kinds of businesses you serve, that's who
yes.
employs more than half of this country, right?
Mm,
So real families and communities are impacted when people get, it's like, yeah, it's like at a certain point, I'm a truck driver's daughter from the wrong side of the track. So the difference between 1.5 million and 2.5 million, that's like monopoly money from where I grew up, right? It's like, I don't even understand, and now I'm a business
agree.
owner and I'm playing in that space, but the importance of this for the everyday person is that when a company is able to, when an owner is able to get that EBITDA from 6% to 14%, maybe now they're paying out profit sharing for the first time. And now
Mm,
somebody's putting an extra house payment on their house, or they're paying their
yeah,
daughter's college tuition. This is like
yeah,
real people are dramatically impacted, and the quality of their lives is dramatically impacted when we pay attention to
yeah.
this stuff. And that fuels me with so much purpose. I can't even tell you.
I love that. I love that. Let's close with you sharing with the audience who it is you work with,
Mhm.
who your firm works with,
Mhm.
and then how can they connect with you? How can they learn more about what you're doing, and how could they connect if they're interested in continuing the conversation with you?
Thank you for asking that. So we do, broadly speaking, two kinds of things. One is I do keynote speaking from the stage. If you
Wonderful.
run an event, attend an event, or on a programming committee for an event, and you think that this kind of content would be helpful, you can find
Mm,
out more about my speaking at caseybrown.com. We
great.
also, as you mentioned, I run a pricing execution firm called Boost Pricing, and we work with
Mm,
companies to help their sellers. We expose the customer tactics customers use to get our stuff for less, and then we arm the sellers with the methods and messaging and tools to negotiate from strength. The kinds of companies we work with in the training business are typically B2B companies because that's where prices are most often negotiated. They have at least a handful of folks on their sales team. We work with very large sales teams, but at least a couple of sales teams. And then sort of the psychographics there is the CEO or sales leader knows or believes there's money being left on the table and they're willing to invest to make it better. Our
mm,
programs are, I mentioned the 10-week program. We have programs that kind of every budget and um, every magnitude, like how much time and effort you
yeah,
want to spend on that. So this isn't something that requires you to be a corporation. In fact, we don't work with corporations. They're small and medium-sized
yeah.
businesses. You can
Wonderful.
find us for that kind of work on boostpricing.com. I also, a la my mission to get the word out about this, there's a book you can, buy for $9.99 on Kindle, or we do a lot of free stuff as well. So there's free resources available on the website. We mentioned one before that is going in the show notes. I also put a lot of content out on LinkedIn and YouTube, and you can find me there at Casey Brown
Wonderful.
Boost, so that no one, no matter their price point or their budget, should be denied the ability to understand how they can charge for their value and command the prices they
Mm,
deserve.
Casey, thank you so much. Great ways for folks to connect with you. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for sharing what clearly has been a lifetime of knowledge around the topic of pricing execution and really the emotional and the psychological aspects of teams being able to capture that. So thank you again. It's been such a pleasure to be in this conversation with you today.
It was an honor and a pleasure, Micah. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for joining us on Legendary Exits. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and be sure to subscribe to the show to stay connected with more stories of purpose-driven exits. You can find more information at legendaryexits.com. Until next time.